Welcome everybody to another Wellbeing's Real Conversations. Today we've got Alex. Alex is Chief Executive Officer for Survivors UK, which is a national charity for male rape and sexual abuse survivors. Alex has been in this industry for about 8 years and has developed and really progressed and introduced innovative services supporting marginalised people within this area, and then helping to work alongside governmental officials to really advise them and help them, direct them. Alex is also was a CEO of a national charity called NUM, which is National Ugly Mums, which is a charity that supports sex workers that throughout the UK when they become victims of crime, and this is essential as well. He's also really an outward, larger than life voice, and is somebody who's in the media often and has had academic publications and has been in the national newspapers. Also, he's got a number of awards that, and the most recent one for Alex was the highly commended Rising Leader at the Charity Times Awards in 2020. And Alex also is a survivor of sexual abuse and has spoken openly about being raped when he was 18 years old, when he was in college in Manchester. And I'm really humbled to be here with Alex today. And really just say, Alex, thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really great to be here. Thank you.
So Alex, I'm excited to get started here. And I'm really curious about your life as a young fella in Lancaster, just like, how was that time for you as you were growing up, in the world, discovering who you were as a young man before you headed to college? How was that time for you?
So it was fine. My childhood was mostly kind of standard. I was my family weren't ever really poor, so I was had resources and so on. I guess the interesting aspect of my childhood, for me, I guess I was from a really, really small town, and in some ways not the most diverse town, so on some level, I guess, growing up as a teenager, coming to terms with my sexuality, being a gay man, was challenging in that area because I felt like I was the only person around like that. Obviously, that wasn't true. There were lots of other people like me, which was one of the reasons why I chose to go to university in a big city like Manchester, or big by the standards that I was used to.
Yeah, Alex, I too saw this as a problem. I came from a little small town, and I saw it was unsafe for friends of mine who were gay when I was 16, 17, 18, for them to be openly outward, that in some cases they got physically abused by people who felt wanted to bully and shame. And I'm curious about, was that in the air in that little town, or is that something you had to deal with before Manchester, or how was that for you?
Yeah, it was definitely something in the air, and I think lots of people who I knew experienced that probably more than I did. I think my tactic when I was a teenager to survive, I guess, was to sort of blend in as much as possible. So I play football, and I threw myself into playing football because I thought that would sort of almost act as a cloak, and people wouldn't realize that I was gay if I was a good footballer, which in a way worked, I guess. And I still play football, and I still love football, but when I play football now, I'm more open about who I am. So I was lucky, I think, in that I was able to, I guess, hide myself in a way. I was, whereas some friends of mine who were perhaps more obviously gay, that they definitely experienced bullying. And when I go back home to where I'm from, I do feel that, I'm openly gay to my family and so on, but I do feel that I'm less open in, if I've got a partner with me, I'm less open in public. I wouldn't hold hands in my hometown or anything like that. Whereas in, even where I live now in Leicester, I would. So there's definitely a self-consciousness that sets in, I think.
Mm-hmm. And this thing about having to hide, this thing that, like, how was that to have to, kind of up until 18, and I suppose Manchester was like freedom. It was a city. It was colourful. It was different. It was way more cosmopolitan. It was all these wonderful things. But how did the hiding and holding in and affect you in those teen years before Manchester?
It was definitely difficult. And I always wonder, and I'm often asked this actually, I always wonder the extent to that had an impact, the extent to which that had an impact on sort of me for the rest of my life. And I think people who do have to hide a part of themselves, whatever that part is, that probably does have lasting impacts for the rest of our lives. I think internalized shame, internalized homophobia, specifically in this case. But I mean, I think I'm fine with who I am now, and I have been for, sort of 10, 15 years. But I think it definitely takes its toll on people, and, all kind of whatever if you've got an identity that is in any way discriminated against, I think it has that impact on people. And it stays with some people forever.
It certainly does. I used to be, I still am, but I'm more a therapist these days. But I spend a long time working in naturopathy and working with people who are, who are constipated, for example, and chronically constipated, and this sort of, and then I go and I sit with them, and I find out that they have a difficulty with expressing their feelings, and they hold huge chapters of their past. And it was affecting them physiologically. So I totally agree that whatever this is the whole struggle we all tend to hold, in environments that don't feel safe,
Yeah.
And so walk me through then. It must have been quite a celebration to know that Manchester was coming close, and walk me through those years and up into the incident.
Yeah, so Manchester for me, because it was 30 miles from where I was brought up, but it just felt like a different world to me. I used to go occasionally as a child with my parents, and it felt like a whole new world, like a metropolitan city, racially diverse, just diverse in every way. And even though I had been a few times, sort of shopping on a Sunday or something like that, I didn't really have a feel for the city until I went to live there. So my university choice was largely based on going to a bigger city, but also not going too far away from home, because like I'd hardly been to other cities in the UK, so I didn't want to be too far away from where I was from. But yeah, it was exciting. It was fun, and I think in some ways my desire to sort of escape the small town meant that when I went into Manchester, I sort of threw myself probably into that city and all the delights of the city, and the bars and the drinking and stuff, probably more than I should have done. And that probably had some effect on me on some level, I would have thought.
Yeah, man. Again, it's like when we hold, then we'll always find a way to medicate as well. So that soothing of the bars, the alcohol, I can imagine being fairly compelling and understandable. And I think there's very few people who enter into college in their first year that don't partake a little bit in that enjoyment. But yeah, I'm also, so what did you study when you entered into the college world?
Yeah, so I studied politics and international relations. So my first job actually after university was in politics. So I've kind of moved about between the third sector and politics, and where those two things kind of meet, so advocacy and trying to change the law, trying to change policies, and how governments and authorities kind of support victims and things like that. So so in my first year I was reading sort of political philosophy and things like that, and whilst also discovering myself, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Wow, man. And and how was it? Did you make many friends when you were there? Were you the type of person that then became very extroverted within that, like you started to shine, or was it still a way in which you were still hiding a little bit?
Yeah, it actually took me a while to. I thought it would be much more seamless from being, I mean, I was an extrovert at sixth form, and I had lots of really good friends, and in a way I was kind of one of the more outgoing people in my sort of social group. And then I went to university, and I had a really bad luck. In my first week of Freshers Week, I caught salmonella. Well, do you catch salmonella? But I must have eaten a dodgy kebab or something. So I had salmonella. So I was in hospital for it was over a week, and I was away from university for quite some time. And obviously the first few weeks of university is when you get to know people. So I ended up not really having any friends my first couple of months. And then when I came back, I met a couple of friends, a couple of new friends, and that they were the people I started to sort of go out with and hang out with. But the other thing for me as well was a few of my friends from sixth form and actually even high school went to the same university, went to Manchester University. And I think because I'd not found my confidence with a new group of friends, I was still friends with them, and they're great people, but I felt that I wasn't able to be fully myself because, I hadn't come out to any of them. And I think that sort of slowed down the process because it wasn't completely new people. It was still people that knew the old me or the me that I'd created to, sort of conceal some elements of myself. There wasn't that much difference between those two incarnations of me, but certainly I saw at the time that they were very different people.
So wow, yeah, I know all about salmonella. I had it, and I had it for like 2 months one time in Sri Lanka. It was a life changer for me. It changed my life. I was either going to make it through it, or I wasn't going to make it through it, and I did make it. I really understand how debilitating that can be sometimes if it's a strong enough strain. So tell me a little bit about, so as you walk in through the college life, like, how many years in, and was there more connecting with, like having attraction and dating or meeting up with people that felt more comfortable within, in the gay scene? Like, how was that for you?
Yeah, it was fine. So what I did, I had sort of one or two friends. I almost led a double life, which was strange because, as soon as I brought those lives together, there was no issue. But the two aspects of my life. So there was one which was I had two gay friends who I used to go out with to the gay scene in Manchester. And then at university during the day, I would have coffee and so on with other friends who didn't know that I was gay, but I think they probably did on some level, but I wouldn't sort of hang out with them as much in the evenings. So that was the sort of two lives I was leading. And, after, I think maybe in my second year of university, I sort of slowly started to join those lives together, and it was fine. But
yeah, I have a lot of clients who, as they lead the double lives, for because of the hiding, they can just show a little bit, and there's always this hyper vigilance about or is it safe, is it not safe, will I be received, will I be, is it safe to be me, is it safe to be me? Yeah. And so how many years into college before that incident happened, and can you walk me through if you feel comfortable to do that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so it was in my first year. It wasn't actually that long after I sort of came back and recovered from salmonella. So it was in that period where most of my friends that I spent sort of my daytimes with didn't know about my sexuality, or they maybe knew on some level, but I hadn't discussed it with them. And I had a couple of friends who were mainly just one friend really, who at this point I was openly gay to. He'd recently come out as well, I think, and he and I used to just go to bars and pubs together. And I think from memory, this was my second time I'd ever been sort of on a night out in a gay bar or pub. And I remember it was a bar called Via Fossa, which is still there. And we were just having some drinks. I think it was, it was like, it definitely wasn't Friday or Saturday. It was a midweek night. We were in the bar. We were chatting on a table to each other, and then three people sort of on the next table started chatting to us. And I was, like I said, I didn't have many friends at this point. I certainly didn't have many friends, gay friends, or friends that knew that I was gay. And I really wanted to sort of be myself and open up about that. So we got chatting to the people on the next table. Two of them were around my age, maybe slightly older, and then the other one was quite a bit older. And they were chatting to us, and about just sort of getting to know them and so on. And then I think because it was a midweek night, maybe at sort of 11:30, the bars or pub closed, and we weren't sort of going on to a late night venue. And they said, "Oh, well, we can go back. We're going to have some drinks at our place," or one of them said at their place. Do you guys want to come? And I was very eager to make friends. I said, one of them, the older guy, hadn't been drinking, it turned out, and he was driving. So we walked round to where their car was parked, which wasn't that far away. And I was, like, as I said, I was just eager to make friends. So I got into the car. My friend got into the car and then changed his mind and got out. And I think he just changed his mind. I don't think he sort of sensed that it was a difficult situation or that anything bad was going to happen, because it certainly didn't feel like that at this point. But I think he just thought he wanted to go home. And I had that sort of split second thought: do I get out and leave with my friend, or do I go home? Do I leave with my friend and go home, or do I stay? And I decided to stay and go back to this house, thinking that I can leave at any point. What I didn't realize was that the house was actually quite far away, and we drove actually onto the motorway, so it was quite a reasonable distance away. And I think where it was sort of in the Yorkshire Moors, this house. So from Manchester, my geography is not very good, but probably 20, 30 miles. And when I got to this house, it was a big house. The guy who was driving, the older guy, it turned out that it was his house. And at this point I was quite drunk as well. It was also a very, like, I remember specific things, like there was a parrot in the house, and it was a very, like, well designed, wealthy person's house. And the guy went and made us drinks, and quite soon after, and at the time soon after, I thought I'd been drugged, like the day after and so on, because I suddenly got much more drunk. And with hindsight, I think I probably was drugged, but it could have just been, that I'd drank too much alcohol. But either way, I suddenly became very, very kind of lethargic and tired, and sort of needed to go and sleep or whatever. And he, the older guy who made the drink, took me up to a bedroom, and sort of put me in a bed, and then sort of left me there. And then soon, about what felt like about half an hour later, he came up to that bedroom and raped me. And I remember sort of not being able to sort of physically move. I remember feeling that I was not because of his force, because of that I was drugged or extremely drunk. And I remember saying sort of please stop. And he did eventually, but I couldn't physically sort of do anything. And it could have been, trauma also paralyzed. People often get paralyzed by trauma, so it could have been that. I don't know, but I definitely, and then when he left the room, I think I just eventually sort of passed out or fell asleep or whatever, and then and that was it.
Wow, like yes. It sounds like the drug GBH. It sounds like and definitely all your motor senses can be dulled and shut down. But I'm kind of just feeling how that must have, how traumatic that must have been for you, and how it takes so much to get over something like this. And for anybody who's watching who has an experience with any sort of abuse, if it's sexual abuse, to really just really acknowledge that this is a massive life event that shouldn't be minimized, that shouldn't be hidden, that shouldn't, of course we do tend to respond in that way for a while. We may not know what happened, but just really anybody who's kind of watching it has anything like this had happened to them, just taking a moment to pause to just really feel into how this is impacting you right now, because Alex has been very brave. He's someone who outwardly talks about his experiences, and not many people do that because of the shame that binds them. And so I just really want to come back to just like the next morning when you woke up, like what happened next?
Yeah, so this is what I think. If I didn't ever report this incident to the police, and if I had, I think this is the kind of thing which would have sort of, in inverted commas, discredited me as a witness, because I I knew that I was far away from university, and I knew that I wanted just to get home and somewhere safe. So he offered to drive me back to university, which sounds strange, but that's kind of actually those kind of things are typical. And it's for me, it was that survival mode really. And he drove me, so he did drive me back from wherever I was in Yorkshire to Manchester and dropped me off. I vividly remember being dropped off sort of right in front of the building where my kind of lectures and tutorials were being held. And the other thing which sort of still stays with me is that, again, me in survival mode didn't want to sort of be confrontational. I was still processing what had happened. I mean, maybe I'm still processing what happened to this very day, but I certainly was for a long time after. But he had his hand on my leg, and I vividly remember not wanting his hand on my leg during the drive back, but not wanting to confront him about the hand on the leg, because I knew that it might have meant I wouldn't have got back to university, or it was kind of just my way of surviving and getting out of the situation as easily and quickly as possible.
Yeah. I've over the years as a therapist, I hear tens and tens of different sorts of experiences that were, and not only sometimes but where they keep returning to the abuser again and again sometimes, because there's a blur that starts to happen, and shock, and it's just, there's a tension there for some people on some level, and there's abuse happening on some level, and the body's screaming on some level that something's not right here. The mind is trying to process it, and there's a big sort of fuzzy freezing that starts to ensue within the individual. So, did you go to college after that day, or did you go home?
Wow. Yeah, I went to it. I'm pretty sure it was a tutorial. So I went and sat in a tutorial with, I don't know, 5 other people discussing some aspects of political theory or something like that. And I think my memory of it, which obviously I don't, my memory might not be completely accurate about the actual day at university and so on, but my memory of it is that I was sort of in a bit of a haze. I was hungover, or suffering from the effects of whatever had kind of debilitated me. So I was feeling really tired, but also I was trying to process what happened to me. And I think at first I just sort of thought something bad happened to me, something that I want to kind of forget about, something I want to move on from, not something that I want to really engage with, on a kind of psychological level. And it took me a while to escape that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very normal response where you want to just block it out. You want to like focus on something, like to distance you or to distract you. And often a lot of medication is used as well, whether it's alcohol or drugs as well, and other toxic relationships sometimes can happen at that time. Just anything that can get you away from, keep you busied away from what happens when you slow down and feel into that area. So how was that next phase, in between you coming out and talking about it?
Yeah, I think I do definitely think that sort of with hindsight, looking back retrospectively, that alcohol was a numbing agent for me, and I definitely drank quite a lot, and it was kind of, it wasn't I never sort of drank at home or on my own, but I really wanted to go out all the time. I wanted to be in bars and pubs all the time. And I think it was just to keep my mind occupied and to not think about it. And, on some level, I always wonder if it's affected my long-term relationship with alcohol, in that, I don't have problematic relationship with alcohol, but I do feel that when I'm going through stressful times, or need to take my mind off things, alcohol is my, the thing that I use most easily. It's the thing that I'm drawn to. I've never, luckily, I've never really used drugs recreationally, occasionally, but not for many years, and nothing kind of serious or heavy. So, but I do feel, maybe I've got an addictive personality or whatever. So I'm deliberately keeping away from things like that, because, sometimes alcohol is a thing that relaxes me or takes my mind off things. So, it definitely affects our relationship with things like that.
Yeah, I work with so many alcoholics and people who use drugs, or whether they use drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping, whatever it is. It helps them. And one guy drew a picture one time, and it was that he was able to jump into this sleeping bag that he zipped up, and he felt so comfortable, and he felt safe from the world around him, and that was his analogy of what it was to be an alcoholic. And we live in a nation of addiction. Addiction is an addictive tendencies. So I totally get that. And like I'm curious about what was the threads of things that happened that made the alcohol no longer work in the way that it was working, that helped you get in touch and start to realize there was something here that needed to change.
I think when I first started to talk to people about what happened to me, I remember really well the first person the person who was there on the night, who was my friend who got out of the car. I sort of explained to him a few days after that, oh, I've had a bad experience. But I think he and I kind of rationalized it as just a bad sexual experience rather than a rape. So I didn't have a proper, conversation with him at any point about it. But the first person I told properly, who I was friends with, who I described it in the way that you would describe a rape, and I was able to use those words, and for the first time really, was a friend called Angela, who was a good friend of mine, and I for some reason I felt easier talking to a woman about it than I would any of my male friends, and that definitely felt like a sort of massive relief that I was able to talk about it. And I think a lot of survivors worry about telling people because they worry about the reaction, and I think a lot of people who have a friend or a family member who's experienced sexual violence may worry about their own reaction. But for me, just a normal human reaction is fine. Like, and I think her reaction was just to swear and say that's awful, which was fine by me. And I think she afterwards said to me, "Oh, I don't think I reacted the best way," and I was like, "Your reaction was perfect. You were just there. You hugged me, and that made it much easier for me to, at least now that someone else knew what happened to me and sort of saw it in those terms, it meant I could start to see it in those terms, that it was, it was a rape, it was a crime, it was something that shouldn't happen, it was something that I wasn't at fault for, even though, on some level I even now reflect and think I did make bad decisions on the night, but that doesn't mean that I'm in any way to blame for what happened. So yeah, that was when I started to I guess started to come to terms with what happened, and was able, because I never actually accessed any professional support about this. So so it's just been my own kind of ways of coping, and I'm in some ways one of the lucky ones, because I did have friends and family that I could speak about it.
Yeah, man. Something you said just that really struck me very deeply, and that was, you were there for me, like to your friend, because that's what's needed. It's like to start to reach out, to be able to have another human bear witness to what you're having a difficulty bearing, and the immense relief that can give, the simpleness of it in some way, but at the same time, how much we're starved of it and in our holding and isolation emotionally. But wow, so your friend started something.
Yeah. And I don't, I'm not really in touch with her anymore. And I don't even know if she realizes, that what a difference that made. I mean, I did tell her at the time, but yeah, it changed my life, really.
Yeah. Sometimes everybody who's, to the listeners here, that sometimes it just takes, like, it's quite something. And if you have one of these, and if you don't have one, then go looking for one or ask for it. Is if you have a friend where you can just be in it, whatever that is, emotions, sadness, loneliness, helplessness, emptiness, shame, guilt, and they don't change or want to alter your state, and like you can just be in it and be seen and not shamed or guilted or told to stop, or some remedy to make you feel positive. Like, as long as, like, for that not to happen and just be in the actual authentic feeling, that's all we need as humans sometimes. And we need that in big heap teaspoonfuls to do this thing called life. And I'm Angela, if you're listening, like, you did it, girl. And sometimes we don't realize that we do it without knowing that we do it by just being in our hearts, Well, it's what started to change after that wonderful connection with your friend Angela? Like what started to emerge after that?
I think I talked about earlier about the sort of two sides to my life. I was almost leading a double life. What happened to me, the rape, became part of my sort of gay life, I guess. It was that part of me that was children. And I think when I started to tell people in other parts of my life about that, I think it meant that I could sort of bring together those two sides of my life and just be one whole person all the time, and be my authentic self more than I was able to previously. So I think that was the main thing that started to change. And I think eventually I did get a really good friendship group, and I was really open. And most of my life I've been open to people about what happened to me. If it comes up, I don't obviously it's not like the first thing I lead with, but yeah, and I'm quite open about it because I think, particularly for men, it just isn't really talked about very much. And when I have spoke about what happened to me publicly, like in the BBC article a few weeks ago and so on, quite a lot of my friends who I've known for years contact me and say, like, well done, or I read that, it was really touching. But also quite a few people say, I've never told you this, but something similar happened to me. And they're people who I've known for years. And they say, I don't, and I say, well, if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here. But most of the time they say, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to acknowledge that something similar has happened to me. And I think that can be quite powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, just the just being able to, I know you had experiences with some of your friends who said, well, I just want to acknowledge it. And for that, that's a massive step. But, and that's healing. And for others, because you've done what you've, and this is my whole thing about well-being, is that we try to want to normalize mental health and emotional struggles because we all have them, and we all have challenges in our life, and we all have struggles. So by someone telling their story and people identifying from whatever part of it that resonates, it gives them permission to maybe do it as well. And this thing about, that happened to me. That could be a step. Someone else might go and say, actually, do you know a therapist I could talk to? Because of what you shared has really helped me realize that it's still haunting me in my relationship right now. And I might need to, I think I need help. And that's so important, Anybody out there that, again, we're going to go into more of the Survivors UK charity later on in the chat here. But so I want to, what happened then after this momentum to get you to where you are today, Alex? What were the stepping stones that started to sort of pave the way for you?
I think my experience with this sort of made me see the world slightly differently, and I think my kind of coming to terms with it and realizing that it was something that I didn't hear about in the media. It's something that I just never heard about, that men could experience that. I think just stayed with me, and my first job, and that meant that I sort of wanted. It sounds a bit cheesy, but it meant that I wanted to in some way make a difference. I wanted to sort of change things in the world as much as I could as kind of one individual. And so I did. After I graduated, I got involved in, I was sort of involved in political activism and sort of human rights activism, LGBT plus activism, and so on. And then I that was always kind of like a big part of my life. And I always thought, even though there were times when I thought, do I want to be like an actual politician? But I always felt on some level that kind of being on the outside and sort of doing more grassroots stuff was always something that would be most fulfilling for me and best use of my skills, I guess, and my passion maybe. So yeah, when I graduated, I worked in politics for a while, but then not long after that, I saw the opportunity to set up an organisation supporting sex workers when they're victims of crime. And I think I saw sex workers as people who are, consistently left out of conversations about them. So, and a lot of them are really marginalised, and they're also targeted by criminals, and the police and the state often don't kind of care so much about them. And so that was kind of what drew me to that. And obviously my own experience of rape, and feeling that I had nowhere to go.
Because I'm always really, really curious around why they gravitate to certain things, and to, like when you focused your sort of passion towards helping these people who are marginalized, who are fundamentally, in your words, left out, forgotten, discarded almost. In a way, in your experience of being raped, and how, and going back many years ago when that happened, how also it wasn't as being gay back then was really a struggle. It was hard to be, generally speaking, it was something that was in some cases taboo. So it was, again, there was a lot of stigma there. So again, I can understand where, in a way, you could really identify with these people who were, struggling because of your own struggles.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely true. And I think I've always sort of tried to like check my own privilege and keep an eye on my own kind of, some of the things that have happened to me in my life have been down to good luck and obviously some bad luck as well. But, and I've always thought, compared to a lot of gay people, I had it reasonably easy. It wasn't perfect, but lots of people kind of suffered more than I did. And compared to a lot of rape survivors, actually, like I don't think it affected me in the kind of deeply fundamental, life-changing way that it does for many people. And I think and that's nothing, I'm not saying in any way that because I'm stronger or different or anything like that, just simply because I had support around me. I had, I had kind of parents that loved me and like all the basic stuff. And it just didn't quite have that. Obviously the trauma, will have affected me, but I was able to carry on with my life because of the support around me. So in a way, I want to, support people who have had similar experiences to me, but it's kind of turned out maybe worse for them in some way because of bad luck and networks that's available to them and so on. And if you're a person of color who happens to be gay, then it's much harder. So that intersectionality of different experiences, which, being a white sort of middle class-ish guy, I'm lucky in that way, I think.
Wow, that's something I've never really thought about, to hear like the color influences often how it's even more intensely stigmatized. And I'd imagine in the UK, because it's such a rich mix of different nationalities, that are you seeing in your, and we're going to get to it, I have a curious question about it right now, like within your organization, do you find that there is more colored people coming forward asking for help, or is it more I'm curious, or is it mostly white?
We need to reach out more to all kinds of minoritized groups, as we call them, and that includes LGBT people, but also we have special groups for Black, Asian, and mixed heritage people, which is our way of acknowledging that we as an organization need to do a lot more, and to be welcoming and to sort of recognize the intersectionality of difference and of different identities and how that impacts on survivors. So I know that one of the issues that many people that Survivors UK support is how men are socialized to to have certain characteristics, be strong and tough, and maybe not talk about, I'm saying that in inverted commas obviously, not talk about their emotions, not be open about their emotions, not show their vulnerability and so on. I think in certain communities, like in certain parts of the Black community, the way that people are socialized to be men might be different, so it might be even harder, and so on. And then equally, if you're a heterosexual survivor, you might many heterosexual survivors go through anxieties about their own sexual orientation, because if they've been raped by a man, it makes them question that. And then on the other hand, if you're a gay survivor, then you might sort of blame yourself more. And so there's all kinds of ways that your identity and your cultural heritage and so on like impacts on, I guess, your relationship with your experience as a survivor as well.
Wow. Like I never like that's a new cater for the heterosexuals who have had sort of sexual violence as well as, and do you find that that's you're able to reach those people as well within the UK?
Yeah, so probably at Survivors UK, we more than half of the people we support are heterosexual, and that, you know, there's definitely significant challenges that are specific to heterosexual survivors, and there's even more so for survivors, male survivors who've experienced sexual violence at the hands of women, which definitely happens a lot more than people think. And the kind of narratives around masculinity make it harder in some ways, because people, you know, there's a guy that we work with at Survivors UK who told me once that when he talks about, he was sexually abused as a child by women, when he talks about that, a lot of people laugh at him because he's a big guy, and they think because he's a big, you know, big sort of physically and looks physically strong, that somehow therefore means that, you know, it's a joke, or that he should have fought them off or whatever, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it's really, really entrenched his trauma and entrenched his feeling of not being heard and ignored by police and so on. And that's made, you know, his whole life much, much harder and much more difficult to process the trauma he's experienced.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. And I just want to, you know, say something to the viewers right now, because again, if anybody's, you know, dealing with or have had an experience of sexual abuse or sexual violence in the home, outside the home, in college, anywhere like this, that there is places where you can get support. These feelings of, you know, where you bury stuff and then it starts to haunt you, whether you're getting flashbacks, whether you're having troubles with intimacy, troubles with connection, troubles with your own sexuality, whenever you start to have struggles or social anxieties, if these are things that are happening to you and there is a vague memory of something that happened that shouldn't have happened, Survivors UK are a phenomenal place to go and get support and get help and start that conversation that really needs to happen. In my work, I work a lot with men and women who have been sexually abused, physically abused, and everything that you're saying, Alex, is what is so it's you know, I also live in Asia, and it's on another spectrum of how often sexual violence is acted out in developing countries, and it's very humbling to know to the extent of that. And I'm so happy that within the UK we have those supports that I often see that we don't in developing countries yet. So wow, and so when did you transition from the CEO of the NUM charity for like really helping the sex workers into where you are today?
While I was CEO of NUM, I was also a trustee of Survivors Manchester, which is the Manchester-based group that supports men who've experienced rape and sexual abuse. And that was kind of my first experience of talking. It was kind of linking together very directly my own personal experiences of sexual violence with my professional work. And that was when I first started to be a bit more open publicly, and when I was doing sort of public speaking events and so on about what happened to me. And then after, because I'd been at the organization NUM for sort of 6 years, I felt I needed a break from running an organization. So I actually left to work briefly in politics on like a specific a specific project. Actually, a lot of my work was on a podcast, a political podcast. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I went back to the sort of charity sector. And my first job, actually, when I returned to the charity sector, was a small human rights charity called Each Other, which is about communicating human rights, and which was really good fun, but it wasn't quite, what the sort of passion, what made me get up in the morning, and it wasn't the issue I was most passionate about. And then I'd always been aware of Survivors UK, and I'd worked with them in different organisations, and they were kind of rapidly growing as well to meet the demand for the services. So I saw that there was a job advertised and just applied for it and got the job. And it feels like a long time ago. It feels like I've been here for a very long time, but it's actually not even 2 years yet. So.
Wow. Well, you've definitely created some changes in that time within the organization. And I suppose, what are you seeing more and more within your organization? Like, what is it that's coming to you? Like, what's the things that you're seeing that need much more, more education and help? Like, what's the struggle that seems to be under this umbrella? Like, what seems to be something that stands out as a habitual thing that's coming in more and more these days into your offices?
I think for us, because partly because of COVID, but also kind of limited resources at like statutory mental health services. So, like the National Health Service and like local authority safeguarding teams and social services. We're finding that a lot of people who might sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago have received support by the state aren't reaching the threshold because they've got less resources to provide that kind of acute mental health support. So we're finding that us as an organisation, I think many organisations like ours, are holding higher levels of risk. So people who are, at higher levels of risk of suicide and self-harm and that kind of thing. And that's, it's really difficult for organisations to deal with that. And I mean, the complexity that some people, presenting to us is severe. So that's one thing that's certainly happening, and I think that's across the sector. And the government and the Mayor of London, in our case, and local authorities are putting more and more funding into sexual violence services like ours, but it's just still never enough. The demand is ever increasing.
Yeah, when you have trauma like this, Alex, you're dealing with, there's multiple parallel struggles that go on within the individual, and it's like, you might fix one thing, but there's 6 to 10 other things that need to be addressed as well, and that's the struggle sometimes.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And we do try and provide as much of a kind of wraparound service as possible and meet as many needs as we can. But obviously, because we've got people on our waiting list, there's only so much we can do for each person. And there are just so many gaps in other parts of service delivery and, meeting people's needs.
Wow. And do you feel that the Survivors UK will stay Survivors UK or will become Survivors worldwide?
It's a good question. I think probably stay Survivors UK, mainly because that there are so many gaps in the UK of support services. Like we have a national online helpline which covers the whole of the UK, but most of our services, our group work as well, is national because we can do it remotely. But most of our services, so our counselling services, face-to-face, is London-based, mainly because of the funding we get and so on. And there are only a handful of services in the UK that provide specialist support for men and boys who've experienced sexual violence. And so at the moment, I guess our mission is to ensure that everyone in first in London and then in the UK has that support, and then working with partners like Survivors Manchester, and there's an organisation called Mankind in Brighton. So working with organisations like that to fill the gaps. And then we do. I mean, I'm always happy to speak to people from other countries who want to, if there's anything we can help them with, advice, in setting up similar things. Like actually, a few days ago, I had conversations with people from the Netherlands it was an organisation like Survivors UK, but I think a bit smaller and a bit younger. You know, they hadn't been around for that long. But yeah, we believe in like a global, you know, network of organisations like ours, and we, you know, we don't want to work in sort of silos, but equally, just resources are so scarce at the moment that we need to focus on the people who are already accessing our services or trying to access our services.
And the sort of counselling, do you have enough specialised counsellors to help you with the work? Is that something you have? It's just you don't have enough funding to be able to offer more, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we would like more. Basically, we've got, you know, the team that we've got is fantastic, but we've just got we need more money to hire more counsellors to you know, to support more people, and that's always it's always our area of growth. You know, it's always what we want to do more of, because it just feels really difficult to tell people that they have to wait a year to access our counselling.
Wow, but there is that. It's a free service, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so wow. So Alex, and just as we come to the end here, I'm really curious about if there was something that you could say to someone who's listening who has had sexual violence of some kind and has been holding it in and is trying to busy themselves with life to forget about it. What would be something you'd like to say to them?
I guess for me, I mean, first of all, I would want to say that you're not alone. Like, it does, you know, it happens to lots of people. And one of the reasons why we call my organisation Survivors UK is because, you know, people survive, and people thrive as well. So it doesn't have to kind of define you. It can be a part of you that you learn to accept. And I would say, I mean, this, you know, it's a long journey of recovery for many people. But for me personally, from my own personal experience, speaking to people has really helped. And like at Survivors UK, we have the online helpline that's national. And even if you just go onto the online helpline and just type, you know, to one of our emotional support workers on there, that can make a huge difference. And we can help you, put you in touch with someone, local support service near to you. And that does make a difference to so many people. So that would be my kind of advice.
Yeah, reach out, know you're not alone, connect and start to have that conversation. And at least we're starting to, you know, be acknowledged, know that, you know, that there can be relief in that. And then eventually in time, then they can avail of some of your counseling services. And is there a waiting list for your groups, or can people also get into those groups pretty quickly as well?
Yeah, so the waiting list for groups is only really, there's a waiting list until like the next tranche of groups starts. So people can get in touch with us on our website, and if they're interested in group work, they can learn more about it there and refer to our groups.
Wow. Well, you know, Alex, I just want to kind of wrap it up here, but I'm really impressed by almost all of what you're doing, but I'm really impressed by just how you bring yourself to the table here, and you allow your story of a contracted, painful experience to be now something expansive that can be a sort of something that you can give to the world that can really bring relief, to know that there is a way, that you don't have to be alone, that it's all about coming together, and it's all about reaching out in some way to just not be alone. And it's a real honor here to be sitting with you. And you know what? I feel that we'll be in contact again in the future. But it's just a privilege, man. Thank you. Keep shining brightly. And it's real, you know. And if anybody here is listening, Survivors UK, you don't have to be alone with it. And Alex is a testament of the sort of warmth and knowledge and ethical and professional sort of quality that you're going to meet there. So yeah, don't be alone.
Great. Thanks, thank Alex. You so much, Ned. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. Take care. Have a good day.
Bye. You too.
Thank you. So, wow, that was powerful, everyone. And I'd really love to, again, just for anybody who's watching, and feeling a little bit stiff in your chairs and you want to stretch and reach out, and just reach over there to the like button, or the share button or the subscribe button, because it really helps us. It helps us reach further. It helps us touch other people. And the algorithms really like it when more people like, share, and subscribe. So thank you, everybody. And I suppose a message from today that I'm really that resonated throughout Alex's share is that reaching out, having that conversation, and that's what's needed. So that's what I want to just reiterate to everyone, that hey, we can't do this thing called life by ourselves. So have a wonderful week. We'll be back at the same time next week. Actually, we'll be back a little bit later on Saturday morning, Asian time. But for the UK people, that'll be a little bit late at night. But we got somebody very interesting coming in. So please stay tuned. Reach out, don't be alone, and share and feel and slow down. Thank you, everybody. Take care.